The fluorescent lights of the gymnasium buzzed overhead, casting a sterile glow on the polished wood floor. The air hung thick with the scent of sweat, old sneakers, and the nervous energy of a high school dance. I leaned against the bleachers, trying to look casual, trying to look like I belonged. Across the room, near the punch bowl, stood Sarah. Even from this distance, she seemed to glow. Her laugh, a light melodic sound, cut through the generic pop music playing from the speakers. She was talking to a group of her friends, and every so often her eyes would flick towards me, a small smile playing on her lips. We'd been talking for weeks, staying late after debate club, walking home the long way, sharing secrets whispered in the hallway between classes. It felt real, like the messy, confusing world of high school was finally starting to make a little sense. Then, Mark walked over. Mark. Even his name felt like a challenge back then. He wasn't taller than me, wasn't necessarily better looking in a classic sense, but he had this presence. He moved through the world like he owned it. Like the rules that applied to everyone else simply bent in his favor. He had a quick wit, a charming smile that could disarm parents and teachers, and a knack for knowing exactly what to say to make anyone feel simultaneously special and slightly off balance. He was my friend, or so I thought. We'd known each other since middle school, navigated awkward phases side by side, shared inside jokes that no one else understood. I watched as Mark approached Sarah's group. He didn't hesitate. He didn't even glance my way. He just sauntered up, flashed that smile, and leaned in close to say something that made Sarah laugh even harder, her head tilting back. A knot began to form in my stomach. It was the kind of knot that felt all too familiar around Mark. A mix of anxiety and the creeping sense of being overlooked. Sarah said something back, gesturing towards me. For a brief moment, I felt a flicker of hope. Was she telling him about us? Was she setting a boundary? My hope was immediately extinguished as Mark turned, finally acknowledging my existence with a casual nod that felt less like a greeting and more like an afterthought. Then he turned back to Sarah, took her hand, and pulled her gently away from the group, leading her towards the dance floor. My breath caught in my throat. It wasn't just that he was dancing with her. It was the way he did it. It was the casual confidence, the proprietary air, the complete disregard for the fact that I was standing right there, that I had been talking to her, liking her, for weeks. It felt like a deliberate act, a public declaration that what was mine could easily become his and that I was powerless to stop it. It was a belittlement, pure and simple. A statement that my feelings, my connection with Sarah, meant nothing compared to his desire to simply take. I stood rooted to the spot, the buzzing lights suddenly feeling too bright, the music too loud. My stomach churned, my hands felt clammy. I wanted to walk over there to say something, anything, but the words wouldn't form. The confidence that had been slowly building over the past few weeks with Sarah evaporated, replaced by that familiar teenage cocktail of awkwardness and inadequacy that Mark seemed so adept at inducing. They danced for what felt like an eternity. I watched them, a silent, miserable observer. He held her close, whispering in her ear, making her laugh. It was clear, painfully clear, that whatever we had been building, Mark had just effortlessly bulldozed over it. Later that night, I walked, home alone, the cool air doing little to calm the heat rising in my chest. It wasn't just sadness I felt. It was a burning humiliation. Mark hadn't just taken a girl I liked. He had stripped away a piece of my confidence, a piece of my self-worth, in front of everyone. He had shown me, and perhaps more importantly, shown himself, that he could simply step into my life and take what he wanted, leaving me standing on the sidelines. The next few weeks were a blur of pain and avoidance. Sarah seemed different. She didn't seek me out in the hallways anymore. When our paths crossed, she would offer a small, apologetic smile, often while standing next to Mark, who would flash that same confident grin, occasionally throwing me a glance that held a hint of triumph. Their relationship became the talk of the school. Intense, public, and yes, full of drama, just as I'd hear later. Arguments in the hallway, public displays of affection, rumors flying. I withdrew. I stopped going to debate club early. I walked home a different way. I threw myself into schoolwork, into books, anything to distract myself from the gnawing feeling of betrayal and the constant reminder of what I had lost. Not just Sarah, but the friend I thought I had in Mark, and the fragile confidence he had, shattered. The pain lingered, a dull ache that occasionally flared into sharp spikes of resentment. I saw them together, looking like the perfect, dramatic couple, and a part of me would twist. It wasn't just about Sarah anymore. It was about the way Mark had treated me, the way he had effortlessly dismissed my feelings and our friendship. It was about the unfairness of it all, the feeling of being perpetually one step behind, less charismatic, less important. But something else started to happen in that period of withdrawal. Withdrawing from the social scene, I poured my energy into other things. I discovered a knack for coding, spending hours in the quiet hum of the computer lab. I devoured books on economics and finance, finding a strange satisfaction in understanding complex systems. The pain of betrayal, the sting of being belittled, transmuted into a quiet, fierce determination. I wouldn't be the guy standing on the sidelines forever. I wouldn't be the one overlooked. I would build something of my own, something solid and undeniable. I lost touch with both of them after high school. College took me to a different state, a different world. I heard snippets through mutual acquaintances that Mark and Sarah's dramatic relationship had imploded spectacularly sometime after graduation, leaving behind a trail of hurt feelings and broken connections. Part of me felt a grim satisfaction at the news, a fleeting sense that perhaps karma was already starting to work. But mostly, I was focused on building my own future, brick by painstaking brick. College was demanding, but I thrived in the structured environment, in the challenge of problem solving, in the meritocracy of academics. The lessons learned from Mark's betrayal, the sting of being belittled, had instilled in me a relentless drive to succeed, to create a life where my worth wasn't dependent on the approval or whims of others. I graduated with honors, landed a promising job in the burgeoning tech sector, and continued to work tirelessly, climbing the corporate ladder with a quiet intensity. Years passed. My career flourished. I was involved in developing innovative software solutions, leading teams, making significant contributions to my company's success. I built a comfortable life for myself, one filled with purpose and surrounded by people who valued competence and integrity. The memories of high school, of Mark and Sarah, faded into the background, becoming less of a raw wound and more of a distant, almost abstract concept. Until, that is, an email landed in my inbox. It was from a headhunter outlining an opportunity to invest in a new startup in a related field. The details were sparse initially, just enough to pique my interest. I scheduled a meeting. The presentation was slick, the technology promising, but as the founder, a nervous man in his late 30s, began to introduce his key personnel, my blood ran cold. Standing next to him, looking significantly older and far less self-assured than I remembered, was Mark. He hadn't changed completely. That glint of confident charm was still there in his eyes, but it was layered with something else, a hint of desperation, a forced smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. He was introduced as the head of business development, a crucial role. For a startup seeking investment, our eyes met across the conference table. For a fraction of a second, the veneer of professionalism cracked. Recognition flashed in his eyes, followed immediately by a flicker of something I couldn't quite place. Surprise? Apprehension? He recovered quickly, offering a practiced nod, but I saw it. The same way I had seen him take Sarah's hand on the dance floor all those years ago. The meeting continued, the founder detailing projections and market analysis. I listened, I asked questions, I maintained my composure, but my mind was reeling. Mark, here, asking for my money. The irony was almost too much to bear. The boy who had effortlessly taken what he wanted from me was now potentially reliant on my decision. The drive home that evening was a blur. The carefully constructed walls I had built around those high school memories crumbled. The humiliation, the pain of being disregarded, rushed back with a force that surprised me. It wasn't just an abstract concept anymore. It was a tangible presence, sitting in a conference room asking for my investment. For days, I wrestled with it. The logical part of my brain analyzed the investment opportunity objectively. The startup had potential. The technology was sound. From a purely financial standpoint, it might be a good move. But the emotional part of me, the part that still remembered the sting of the gymnasium lights and the feel of being invisible, screamed at me to walk away, or perhaps to do something else entirely. The idea started as a whisper, a dark, tempting thought. Revenge. Not petty, but something significant. Something that would make Mark finally understand the consequences of his actions, not just for him, but for others. It wasn't about Sarah anymore. It was about the principle of it, about the years of quiet resentment, about the validation of the pain he had caused. I started doing more research, not just on the company, but on Mark himself. It wasn't difficult in the age of readily available information. His professional history was patchy, several short stints at different companies, a few failed ventures. It seemed his charm could open doors, but his lack of substance, or perhaps his tendency towards cutting corners, prevented him from building anything lasting. There were whispers online, subtle negative reviews from former colleagues, mentions of projects that fell apart. It painted a picture of a man who relied on superficial appeal rather than genuine competence. The opportunity for karma, for a reckoning, presented itself subtly at first. The headhunter followed up, asking for my decision. I didn't say no immediately. Instead, I asked for more detailed financials, a deeper dive into their business plan, and specifically, more information on the roles and responsibilities of the key personnel, including Mark. This request wasn't unusual for a potential investor, but it gave me leverage. I began to ask pointed questions about Mark's projections, his strategy, his past performance in similar roles. I wasn't overtly hostile, but my questions were sharp, probing, forcing him to defend assumptions and glossed over details. In subsequent meetings, conducted remotely at my request, I could see the confidence draining from him, replaced by a familiar nervousness I had once felt in his presence. The true opportunity came when my company was looking to acquire a smaller firm. This was my domain. I was part of the core team evaluating potential targets. A small, struggling company came across my desk, one with outdated technology but a valuable client list. As I reviewed their management team, I saw a familiar name: Sarah. She wasn't the vibrant, laughing girl from the gymnasium anymore. Her photo showed a woman who looked tired, perhaps burdened. She was listed as a senior manager in sales. A complex set of emotions washed over me. Surprise, a pang of that old teenage longing, but also a cold, calculated recognition of a potential intersection. I dug deeper into this company, learning about their financial struggles, their desperate need for a buyer. I also learned through discreet inquiries that Mark had been trying to get a consulting gig with them recently, pitching himself as a turnaround expert, no doubt using that old charm offensive. His timing was unfortunate for him. Their focus was on finding a buyer, not hiring consultants. An idea formed, a plan that felt both audacious and deeply satisfying. It involved bringing these disparate threads together. I initiated contact with the struggling company, expressing preliminary interest in acquisition. Their response was immediate and eager. I set up a meeting with their leadership team, including Sarah. Seeing her again in person was strange. The years had left their mark, as they do on all of us, But the core of the girl I had been infatuated with was still there, albeit hidden beneath layers of professional weariness. We kept the conversation strictly professional, discussing the company's assets, their challenges, their hopes for the future. There was no mention of the past, no awkward acknowledgments of our history. It was as if high school had happened to different people. During the negotiations, I steered the conversation towards the need for a streamlined management structure post-acquisition. This was standard practice, but I used it as a lever. I learned that Mark had indeed been aggressively pitching them his consulting services, even going so far as to make promises he couldn't possibly keep, according to some of their frustrated employees. He was still operating the same way, all flash and no substance. This solidified my plan. I made it clear to the struggling company that our acquisition offer was contingent on a complete overhaul of their sales division, including the departure of certain individuals whose performance or methods were deemed incompatible with our company culture. While I didn't name names initially, I made my expectations clear through strategic questions and subtle hints about the kind of leadership and integrity we valued. Simultaneously, I continued my engagement with the startup Mark was involved with. I didn't kill the investment deal outright. Instead, I dragged it out, asking for more data, more reassurances, expressing carefully worded concerns about the reliability of their key personnel, particularly in business development. I commissioned independent assessments, subtly guiding the assessors towards areas where Mark's track record was questionable. The pressure mounted on both fronts. The struggling company was desperate for the acquisition, and they began to make the necessary internal changes to meet our conditions. This included phasing out certain consultants and managers who weren't seen as long-term assets. Mark's attempts to secure a lucrative consulting contract with them were unceremoniously shut down. He had relied on charm and bluster, but they needed stability and results, something he evidently couldn't provide. At the same time, my persistent, pointed questions and the independent assessments were raising red flags for the other potential investors in the startup with Mark. Doubts about his competence and reliability began to circulate. The initial excitement around their funding round started to wane. Investors, spooked by the uncertainty I had carefully introduced, started pulling back or significantly reducing their offers. The drama unfolded with a satisfying, almost cinematic precision. The struggling company, in their eagerness to secure the acquisition, made the difficult decision to restructure, letting go of several long-term employees, including, I later learned, Sarah. It wasn't a direct act of revenge against her. She was simply caught in the crossfire of a corporate restructuring driven by my conditions. A somber reminder that life's consequences are rarely neatly contained. And Mark? The startup's funding round collapsed. The doubts I had sowed, coupled with his inability to secure the consulting deal with the other company, which he had been counting on to demonstrate his value, painted a picture of a man who couldn't close deals or inspire confidence. The lead investors pulled out completely, citing concerns about the management team's ability to execute. The startup, starved of capital, began laying off staff. Mark, the charming head of business development, was among the first to go. His public profile, once filled with optimistic pronouncements about the startup's future, went silent. I heard about it through the grapevine, a casual mention from someone in the industry about the startup's failure and Mark's sudden unemployment. There was no gloating, no public spectacle. Just a quiet confirmation that the carefully placed dominoes had fallen exactly as intended. The feeling wasn't pure elation. It was more complex. There was a sense of justice, a deep, quiet satisfaction that the boy who had taken so much from me with such casual disregard had finally faced a consequence proportionate to his actions and character. He had built his world on charm and manipulation, and when faced with genuine scrutiny and the need for substance, it had crumbled. But there was also a touch of melancholy. Seeing Sarah's name among those laid off, even though it wasn't the primary goal, was a reminder. that these actions had wider repercussions. The intricate web of relationships and consequences wasn't just about me and Mark. Years later, sitting in my spacious office, looking out at the city skyline, I reflect on it all. The teenage pain, the quiet determination, the carefully orchestrated sequence of events. Mark's downfall wasn't solely my doing, of course. His own character flaws, his tendency to overpromise and underdeliver, were the foundation of his struggles. I had simply accelerated the process. I had used the power and influence I had built through years of hard work to ensure that his actions finally had tangible, negative consequences for him. It wasn't about being petty. It was about reclaiming a sense of agency, about proving to myself that I wasn't the powerless kid on the sidelines anymore. It was about a form of karma, perhaps delivered through my own hand, that felt necessary to close a chapter of lingering hurt. I'm happy now, truly happy. My career is fulfilling, my life is stable, and the relationships I have are built on mutual respect and genuine connection, not fleeting charm or manipulation. The memory of the gymnasium dance, of Mark and Sarah walking away, still exists, but it no longer carries the sting it once did. It's a reminder of where I came from, of the pain that fueled my determination, and of the long, winding path that led me to where I am today. Mark's fate, as far as I know, never fully recovered. He bounced around in different roles, never finding the same footing he had seemingly taken for granted in high school. The world outside the insular bubble of teenage popularity demanded more than just a charming smile. It demanded substance, integrity, and genuine competence. Qualities he had shown little of when he effortlessly took Sarah's hand and led her away from me, leaving me alone under the buzzing lights. Yes, I was sad back then, deeply, painfully sad. But looking back from where I stand now, I wouldn't change a thing. That moment of betrayal, that feeling of being belittled, was the catalyst that pushed me to build a life Mark could never have taken from me. And in the end, the universe, perhaps with a little nudge from me, seemed to ensure that he too faced a reckoning for the way he chose to move through the world, and for that, I am profoundly, undeniably happy.